I'm Wes Callihan. I'm the main lecturer on the Old Western Culture video series of the Great Books. I'll be reading Book 1 of the Odyssey today. This is a new rendering that I've done based on the 1879 Butcher and Lang translation, which was famous in its own day for its accuracy. But the style was a very sort of King James version, kind of Lamort D'Arthur, Sir Thomas Malory style. It doesn't work so well for modern audiences, so of course many newer translations in the 20th and now the 21st century are more accessible for many people. But I like these old translations. So I did a rendering of the Iliad based on the 1883 Lang, Leaf, and Meyer translation, and that's published by Roman Roads Press, and you should talk to them about getting a copy if you haven't already done it. And so now this is my rendering of the Odyssey based on the 1879 Butcher and Lang translation. Lang is the common element in both those collaborations. He was quite the stylist and a poet in his own right. And this is one reason I like these old translations. Many of the more recent translators in the 20th and 21st century are quite good, but I like these 19th century British translators because they were poets in their own right as well as being scholars. And Andrew Lang especially was a great poet, and many of his books on poetry and on myths and fairy tales are wonderful, delightful, and his ability with style, with English style, as well as his scholarship and his ability to deal with the ancient Greek shows up in these old translations, and that's why I've been updating these old ones. So now I'll be reading Book 1 of the Odyssey, and this is my new rendering based on the old translation. Tell me, Muse, of the man of many turnings who wandered far and wide after he had sacked the sacred citadel of Troy. Many were the men whose cities he saw and whose minds he learned, and many the woes he suffered in his heart upon the deep sea, striving for his own life and the return of his companions. Even so, he could not save his companions, though he desired it greatly, for they perished through the blindness of their own hearts, the fools who devoured the oxen of Helios, son of Hyperion, and the god took away from them their day of returning. Of all these things, goddess, daughter of Zeus, from wherever you have heard them, tell them now to us. Now all the rest, as many as had fled from sheer destruction, were at home and had escaped both war and the sea. But Odysseus only, longing for his wife and his homeward way, was held by the lady nymph Calypso, the lovely goddess, in her hollow caves, longing to have him for her lord. But now, when the year had come in the round of the seasons in which the gods had ordained that he should return home to Ithaca, not even then was he free of his troubles or back with his loved ones. But all the gods had pity on him, except Poseidon, who raged continually against godlike Odysseus, until he came to his own country. But Poseidon had now departed for the distant Ethiopians, who are divided in two, the remotest of men, some living where Hyperion sinks, and some where he rises. There he waited to receive the great sacrifice of bulls and rams. There he rejoiced sitting at the feast. But the other gods were gathered in the halls of Olympian Zeus. Then among them the father of gods and men began to speak, for he thought in his heart of noble Aegisthus, whom the son of Agamemnon, far-famed Orestes, slew. Thinking about him, he spoke out among the immortals. Look now how vainly mortal men blame the gods, for they say evil comes from us, but it is they who bring upon themselves, through the blindness of their own hearts, sorrows beyond what is ordained. Even lately, Aegisthus, beyond what was ordained, took to himself the wife of the son of Atreus, and killed her lord on his return. And he did it with sheer doom before his eyes. For we had warned him by sending Hermes the sharp-sighted, the slayer of Argos, that he should neither kill the man nor court his wife. For the son of Atreus would be revenged by the hand of Orestes, as soon as he came of age and longed for his own country. So spoke Hermes, yet he did not persuade the heart of Aegisthus for all his good intention, and now he has paid the price for all. And the goddess, grey-eyed Athena, answered him, saying, Our father, son of Cronos, throned in the highest, that man certainly suffered a death that he earned. Let all who do such deeds perish the same way. But my heart is torn for wise Odysseus, that unfortunate one, who far from his friends suffers affliction for so long on a wave-washed island, the navel of the sea, a wooded island, and in it a goddess has her dwelling, the daughter of malevolent Atlas, who knows the depths of every sea and upholds the tall pillars which keep earth and sky apart. It is his daughter who holds the unfortunate man in sorrow, and always with soft and soothing tales she charms him to forgetfulness of Ithaca. But Odysseus, longing to see, but the smoke rising upward from his own land, has a desire to die. As for you, your heart does not care at all, Olympian. Did not Odysseus, by the ships of the Argives, freely offer sacrifices to you in the wide Trojan land? Why then are you so angry with him, O Zeus? And Zeus, the cloud-gatherer, answered her and said, My child, what word has escaped the door of your lips? How could I forget divine Odysseus, who in understanding is beyond mortals, and more than all men has sacrificed to the deathless gods who keep the wide heaven? No, it is Poseidon, the encircler of the earth, who has been angry continually with undying anger because of the Cyclops whose eye he blinded, godlike Polyphemus, whose power is greatest over all the Cyclopes. His mother was the nymph Thoasa, daughter of Phorcys, lord of the barren sea, and in its hollow caves she lay with Poseidon. From that day on, Poseidon, the earth-shaker, does not indeed destroy Odysseus, but drives him wandering far from his own country. But now let us all take good counsel here about his return, so that he may be got home. So Poseidon will let go of his anger, for in no way will he be able to strive alone against all the deathless gods. Then the goddess, grey-eyed Athena, answered him and said, Our father, son of Cronos, throned in the highest, if indeed this plan is now pleasing to the blessed gods, that wise Odysseus should return to his own home, then let us quickly send Hermes the messenger, the slayer of Argos, to the island of Ogygia. There, with all speed, let him declare to the lady of the braided tresses our sure counsel, the return of patient Odysseus, so that he may come to his home. But as for me, I will go to Ithaca, that I may rouse his son all the more, planting strength in his heart, to call an assembly of the long-haired Achaeans, and speak out to all the suitors who continually slaughter the sheep of his thronging flocks, and his cattle with trailing feet and shambling gait. And I will guide him to Sparta and to sandy Pylos to seek news of his beloved father's return, if perhaps he may hear of it, and so that he might gain a good reputation among men. She spoke, and bound beneath her feet the lovely immortal golden sandals, and that carried her over both the wet sea and the endless land, swift as the breath of the wind. And she seized her mighty spear, clad with sharp bronze, weighty and huge and strong, with which she subdues the ranks of heroes, those with whom she, the daughter of the mighty father, is angry. Then from the heights of Olympus she came flashing down, and she stood in the land of Ithaca at the entry of the gate of Odysseus, on the threshold of the courtyard, holding in her hand the spear of bronze in the appearance of a stranger, Mentes, the captain of the Taphians. And there she found the lordly suitors. They were taking their pleasure at draughts in front of the doors, sitting on hides of oxen, which they themselves had slaughtered. And some of the attendants and the servants were mixing wine and water for them in bowls, and some were washing the tables with porous sponges and setting them, and others were carving meat in great quantities. And godlike Telemachus was far the first to observe her, for he was sitting with a heavy heart among the suitors, imagining his noble father, if perhaps he might come from somewhere and scatter the suitors throughout the palace, and gain honor and establish rule among his own possessions. Thinking about this as he sat among the suitors, he saw Athena, and he went straight to the outer porch, for he thought in his heart that it was shameful that a stranger should stand long at the gates. And stopping near her, he clasped her right hand, and took from her the spear of bronze, and lifted his voice, and spoke winged words to her. Greetings, stranger, you will be kindly treated with us, and afterwards, once you have eaten, you may tell us what you need. With that he led the way, and Pallas Athena followed. And when they were inside the spacious house, he set her spear which he carried against a tall pillar, in the polished spear stand where many other spears stood also, those of Odysseus of the stout heart. And he led the goddess, and seated her on a beautifully carved chair, and spread a linen cloth under it, and beneath that was a footstool for the feet. For himself, he placed an inlaid seat close by, away from the crowd of the suitors, lest the stranger should be disturbed by the noise and should be put off from the meal, having come among arrogant men, but also so that he might ask him about his father, who was gone from home. Then a handmaid carried water for washing hands in a noble golden pitcher, and poured it out over a silver basin to wash with, and pulled next to them a polished table. And a dignified maid brought wheat bread, and set it nearby, and laid on the board many delicacies, freely giving whatever she had close at hand. And a carver lifted and placed beside them platters of various kinds of meat, and near them he set golden bowls, and an attendant walked back and forth pouring wine for them. Then the haughty suitors came in, And they sat down in rows on chairs and on high seats, and attendants poured water on their hands, and maidservants piled wheat bread by them in baskets, and servants filled up the bowls with drink, and they stretched out their hands to the good food spread before them. When the suitors had satisfied the desire for food and drink, they thought of other things, the song and dance, for these are the crown of the feast. And an attendant placed a beautiful lyre in the hands of Phemius, who was barred for the suitors against his will. As he touched the lyre, he lifted up his voice in sweet songs. But Telemachus spoke to gray-eyed Athena, holding his head close to her so that those others could not hear. Dear stranger, will you indeed be angry at what I will say? Those men truly care for such things as these, the lyre and song, thoughtlessly, as those who consume the livelihood of another without repayment, of that man whose white bones, it may be, lie rotting in the rain on the mainland, or the waves tumble them in the salt sea. If only these men were to see him returned to Ithaca, they would all pray more for greater speed of foot than for gain of gold and fine clothing. But now he has perished, a terrible fate, and there is no comfort for us. No, not even though any earthly man should say that he will come again. Gone is the day of his returning. But tell me this, and tell me everything clearly. Who are you of the sons of men, and where are you from? Where is your city, and where are those who begot you? On what kind of ship did you come, and how did sailors bring you to Ithaca, and who did they claim to be? For in no way do I think that you came here by land. And tell me this truthfully, that I may know for certain whether you are a newcomer, or whether you are a familiar guest of the house, since many strangers used to come to our house because my father had traveled much among men. Then the goddess, gray-eyed Athena, answered him, I will plainly tell you everything. I call myself Mentes, son of wise Anchialos, and I rule the Taphians, lovers of the oar. And now I have come to shore, as you see, with ship and crew, sailing over the wine-dark sea, to men of strange speech, even to Temesa, in search of copper, and my cargo is shining iron. And my ship is lying there toward the upland, away from the city, in the harbor of Rhaethron, beneath wooded Neon. And we declare ourselves to be friends of one another, and from friendly houses from a long time past. If thou desire assurance, go ask the old man, the hero Laertes, who they say does not come to the city any more, but far away toward the upland suffers grief, with an ancient woman for his handmaid, who places food and drink near him whenever weariness takes hold of his limbs, as he hobbles along the knoll of his vineyard plot. And now I have come, for indeed I was told that he, your father, was among his people, but the gods obstruct his journey. For noble Odysseus has not yet perished on the earth, but I think still lives and is kept on the wide deep in a wave-washed island, and perhaps rough, wild men keep him harshly against his will. But now indeed I will utter my word of prophecy as the immortals bring it into my heart, and I think it will be accomplished, though I am no prophet, nor am I skilled in the omens of birds. After this time he will not be far from his beloved country for long, not even if bonds of iron bind him. He will plan a way to return, for he is a man of many devices. But tell me this plainly, whether indeed, as tall as you are sprung from Odysseus. Truly your head and bright eyes are wonderfully like his, for many times we have talked together before he set sail for Troy, where the others too, the bravest of the Argives, went in their hollow ships. From that day onward I have not seen Odysseus, nor has he seen me. Then wise Telemachus answered her and said, I will plainly tell you everything. My mother indeed says that I am his. As for me, I do not know, for no man ever knew his own descent himself. If only I had been the son of some blessed man whom old age overtook among his own possessions. But they say that I am the son of that man who is the most unfortunate of mortals, since you question me about that. Then the goddess, gray-eyed Athena, spoke to him and said, Surely the gods have not ordained a nameless lineage for you in days to come, since Penelope bore such a noble man as you. But tell me this plainly, what feast, or rather what dissipation is this? What do you have to do with it? Is it a clan drinking, or a wedding feast? For this is not a banquet where each man brings his share. In this way, swollen with insolence, they seem to me to revel wantonly throughout the house, and any man might well be angry to see so many deeds of shame, if any wise man came among them. Then wise Telemachus answered her and said, Sir, since you question me about these things and inquire about them, our house was once rich and honorable, while that man was still among his people. But now the gods have willed it otherwise, with evil intent, for they have made him pass utterly out of sight like no one ever before. Indeed, I would not grieve so much even for his death had he fallen among his companions in the land of the Trojans, or in the arms of his friends when he had wound up the war. Then the whole Achaean host would have built him a barrow, and he would have won great glory even for his son in after days. But now the spirits of the storm have swept him away into obscurity. He is gone, lost to sight, lost to knowledge, but for me he has left grief and lamentation. Nor is it for him alone that I mourn and weep, since the gods have caused other terrible sorrows for me. For all the noblest princes in the isles, in Dulichium and Same and wooded Zacynthus, and all who lord it over rocky Ithaca, all these court my mother and waste my house. But as for her, she neither refuses the hated marriage, nor has the heart to end the matter. So they devour and waste my house, and before long they will make havoc of me too. Then in great displeasure Pallas Athena spoke to him. What a shame! Surely you are greatly in need of far-off Odysseus to stretch forth his hands upon the shameless suitors. If only he could come now and stand at the entrance of the gate with helmet and shield and 2 spears, as mighty a man as when I first saw him in our house drinking and rejoicing, at that time when he came up out of Ephyra from Ilus, son of Murmurus. For Odysseus had gone there on his swift ship to seek a deadly drug, that he might have it to smear on his bronze-shod arrows. But Ilus would in no way give it to him, for he was in awe of the gods who live forever. But my father gave it to him, for he loved him greatly. If only Odysseus might in that same strength deal with these suitors, they would all have a swift fate and a bitter wedding. However, these things surely lie on the knees of the gods, whether he shall return or not, and take vengeance in his halls. But I urge you to consider how you might drive out the suitors from the hall. Come now, listen and heed my words. Tomorrow call the Achaean lords to the assembly, and announce your words to all, and take the gods as witness. Bid the suitors to disperse, each one to his own place. And as for your mother, if her heart is inclined to marriage, let her go back to the hall of that mighty man her father, and her people will furnish a wedding feast, and arrange for the many courtship gifts that should go with the dearly beloved daughter. And to you I will give a word of wise counsel, if you will listen. Outfit a ship, the best you have, with 20 oarsmen, and travel to inquire about your father who is so far off, if perhaps anyone will tell you anything, or you may hear the voice of Zeus, which above all brings news to men. Go first to Pylos, and inquire of noble Nestor, and from there to Sparta, to Menelaus of the fair hair, for he came home last of all the well-armored Achaeans. If you hear news of the life and the return of your father, then indeed you can endure the troubles for another year. But if you hear that he is dead and gone, then return to your own dear country, and pile his burial mound, and over it serve the burial rites, as many as is fitting, and give your mother to a husband. But when you have done all this, then consider in your mind and heart how you might slay the suitors in your halls, whether secretly or openly, for you should not continue thinking as a child, since you are no longer of the age for it. Have you not heard what glory noble Orestes got for himself among all men, because he killed the slayer of his father, treacherous Aegisthus, who killed his famous father? And you too must be courageous, my friend, for I see that you are noble and tall, so that even men not yet born will praise you. But now I will go down to the swift ship and to my men, who I think are very impatient, waiting for me. Take heed and listen to my words." Then wise Telemachus answered her, saying, "Sir, indeed you speak these things from a friendly heart, as a father to his son, and I will never forget them. But now I beg you to stay here, even though you are eager to be gone, so that after you have bathed and enjoyed yourself, you may go your way to your ship, joyful in spirit, with a costly and very noble gift, to be a remembrance of my giving, such as dear friends give to friends." Then the goddess, grey-eyed Athena, answered him, "Do not keep me any longer, for I am eager to be on my way. But give to me whatever gift your heart urges you when I come back again, for me to carry home. Bring out from your stores a most noble gift, and you will receive its worth in return." So grey-eyed Athena spoke and departed, and like an eagle of the sea she flew away. But in his spirit she planted strength and courage, and brought to his mind his father even more than before. And he saw and was amazed, for he realized that it was a god, and soon he went back among the suitors, a godlike man. Now the famous bard was singing to the suitors, and they sat listening in silence. And his song was of the pitiful return of the Achaeans, that Pallas Athena laid on them as they came back from Troy. And from her upper chamber the daughter of Icarius, wise Penelope, heard the glorious music, and she went down the high stairs from her chamber, not alone, for two of her handmaids kept her company. Now when the fair lady had come to the suitors, she stood by the pillar of the well-built roof, holding up her shining veil before her face, and a faithful maiden stood on either side of her. Then she began weeping, and spoke to the divine bard. Phemius, since you know many other songs for mortals, deeds of men and gods, which bards rehearse, sing of these as you sit by them, and let them drink their wine in silence. But stop this pitiful tune that continually wastes my heart within my breast, since to me beyond all women has come a sorrow without comfort. So dear a head do I long for in constant memory, that man whose fame is praised everywhere from Hellas to the middle of Argos. Then wise Telemachus answered her and said, Mother, why do you refuse to let the glorious bard gladden us as his spirit moves him? It is not bards who are at fault, but rather Zeus, I think, who is at fault, for he gives to all men who live by bread what he will. As for the bard, do not blame him if he sings about the unfortunate travels of the Danaans, for men always prize that song the most which rings newest in their ears. But let your heart and mind bear up to listen, for Odysseus is not the only one who lost the day of his homecoming in Troy, but many others also perished. Nevertheless, go to your chamber and attend to your tasks, the loom and spindle, and urge your handmaids to work at their tasks. Speech will be for men, for all, but for me most of all, for I am the lord of the house. Then in amazement she went back to her chamber, and she laid up the wise saying of her son in her heart. She ascended to her upper chamber with the women who were her handmaids, and then wailed for Odysseus, her dear lord, till grey-eyed Athena cast sweet sleep upon her eyelids. Now the suitors clamored throughout the shadowy halls, and each one uttered a prayer to be her bedfellow. But wise Telemachus spoke out among them. Suitors of my mother, men outrageous beyond measure, let us feast now and make merry, and let there be no brawling. It is a good thing to listen to a bard such as this one, like the gods in his voice. But in the morning let us all go to the assembly and sit down, so that I may announce my words clearly. That you leave these halls and busy yourselves with other feasts, consuming your own wealth, going in turn from house to house. But if you think this a likelier and a better thing, that one man's goods should perish without repayment, then waste it as you please, and I will call upon the everlasting gods, if perhaps Zeus may grant that revenge be made. Then you would perish within these halls without making atonement. So he spoke, and all who heard him bit their lips and marveled at Telemachus, because he spoke boldly. Then Antinous, son of Epathes, answered him, Telemachus, indeed the gods themselves had taught you to be so proud and bold in your speech. May the son of Cronos never make you king in sea-encircled Ithaca, though it is your inheritance by right. Then wise Telemachus answered him and said, Antinous, will you indeed be angry at the word that I will speak? Yes, at the hand of Zeus I would be eager to take this thing upon me. Do you say that this is the worst thing that can happen to a man? No, it is not a bad thing to be a king. The house of such a man quickly grows rich, and he himself is held in greater honor. However, there are many other kings of the Achaeans in sea-circled Ithaca, both young and old. One of them will surely obtain this kingship, since noble Odysseus is dead. But as for me, I will be lord of our own house and servants, which noble Odysseus won from me with his spear. Then Eurymachus, son of Polybus, answered him, saying, Telemachus, surely it lies on the knees of the gods what man is to be king over the Achaeans in sea-circled Ithaca. But may you keep your own possessions and be lord in your own house. May no one ever come to force violently from you your wealth against your will while Ithaca still stands. But I would ask you, friend, about the stranger. Where is he from, and of what land does he claim to be? Where are his people in his native fields? Does he bring some news of your father on his journey, or does he come to conduct some business of his own? So suddenly he started to leave, and then he was gone, and he did not linger so we could know him, and yet he seemed to be no ordinary man to look upon. Then wise Telemachus answered him and said, Eurymachus, surely the day of my father's returning has passed. Therefore I do not put faith in news any more, no matter where they come from, nor do I care for prophecies about which my mother has inquired from the mouth of a soothsayer when she has invited him to the hall. But as for that man, he is a friend of my house from Taphos, and he says he is Mentes, son of wise Anchialos, and he is lord over the Taphians, lovers of the oar. So spoke Telemachus, but in his heart he had recognized the immortal goddess. Now the suitors returned to the dance and the delightful song, and made merry, and waited till evening should come. And as they made merry, evening came upon them. Then each one went to his own house to lie down to rest. But Telemachus, where his chamber was built high up in the noble court, in a place with a high view, went to his own bed, pondering many thoughts in his mind, and with him went trusty Eurycleia, and carried burning torches for him. She was the daughter of Ops, son of Pasenor, and Laertes bought her once upon a time with his wealth, while she was still in her youth, and paid 20 oxen for her. And he honored her as much as he honored his beloved wife in the halls, but he never lay with her, for he avoided the anger of his lady. She went with Telemachus and carried the burning torches for him, and of all the women of the household she loved him most, and she had nursed him when he was little. Then he opened the doors of the well-built chamber and sat on the bed and took off his soft jacket and put it in the wise old woman's hands. So she folded the jacket and smoothed it and hung it on a pin by the jointed bedstead and went away from the room and pulled the door closed with the silver handle and pulled the bar shut with the leather strap. There, all night long, wrapped in a wool fleece, he meditated in his heart about the journey that Athena had revealed to him.